is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft beer and craft chocolate. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional beer writer and an advanced cicerone, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or at her website, annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Hey everyone. As most of you have probably seen by now, my new book, Pairing Beer and Chocolate, A Guide to Bringing the Flavors of Craft Beer and Craft Chocolate Together, is now out in the world. You can purchase it on beantobarstool.com or on amazon.com. The book is basically an updated and expanded version of the zine, Pairing Beer and Chocolate, that I published in 2023. There are additional beer styles that I've added in here, swapped out a lot of the examples that I used in the zine for new ones in here, went through page by page and just made a lot of informational updates. There's some room for taking notes, and I've added a few informational sections. So definitely check out this book if you are at all interested in pairing beer and chocolate. In addition to those web options for purchasing the book, there are a few places that are selling it in real life out there. So if you are in these areas, you can pick it up. Brewery Ardennes in Geneva, New York is selling it in their tap room. Violet Sky Chocolate and Cloud Walking Coffee are going to be carrying this in South Bend, Indiana, hopefully by next week. Nostalgia Chocolate in North Carolina will be carrying this. If you own a chocolate shop, cafe, brewery, tap room, whatever it is, and you're interested in stocking this book in your space for your customers, get in touch. We do really easy wholesale terms, no minimum orders, so just get in touch. We'd love to see it in your establishment. In honor of the release of this book, I thought today we would talk a little bit about how to host a beer and chocolate pairing at home. If you're interested in doing that, I've got a lot of information in the book about how to host a beer and chocolate pairing, so a lot of what I'll talk in here is taken from that. Before we jump into talking about pairing, we've got a few new supporters on Patreon that I want to give a shout out to. Morgan Wright increased his support level from Zinester to sponsor. Huge thanks to Morgan. Also, Cincinnati State Brewing Program is a new pro level sponsor, so you'll be hearing more about them soon. Big thanks to Morgan and Cincinnati State. If you want to support us on Patreon, both for what we're doing here on Bean to Barstool and for the Final Gravity beer zine that comes out quarterly, head to patreon.com/beantobarstoolzines. We've got several different options on there for how you can support us. So let's talk a little bit about how to host a beer and chocolate pairing at home. Now, it is entirely possible to have a fun evening with friends pairing beer and chocolate with basically no preparation at all. But if you're wanting to do a little bit more of a special event, great parties tend to require planning. So we're going to go through some things that you should think about in advance before the actual evening of the event. And the biggest thing that you need to think through is whether or not you want your pairing to be more casual and laid back and kind of free form, or more of a structured formal pairing. So in the more free-form version, you're going to have several different beers, several different chocolates, and you and your guest are just kind of going to taste what you want to as you're going along. Everybody can pick which chocolate they want to try with each beer, mix and match different things, talk about it as you're going. That can be a lot of fun. For the more structured pairing, you're going to have planned courses of a specific beer with a specific chocolate, and you and the group will walk through those one course at a time and talk about those as you're going. Which one you want to do is going to have a big influence on how you go about planning the event. In either case, your ideal group size is usually going to be 6 to 12 people. Fewer than that, and you won't necessarily have the critical mass to actually get discussion and conversation going. More than that, and you can end up kind of shutting down some of the folks in your group. Whenever you get a decent number of people into a room together, you're going to have some personalities who aren't as comfortable talking or speaking up, asking questions, sharing tasting notes in front of the group. So more than 12 people will often start to just kind of zero in on a few voices in the group rather than actually benefiting from everybody's perspective. So 6 to 12 people is a good range. Now, if you're doing the more casual option where you're just having friends hang out, that can be a little bit looser. Fewer people is fine. You can even get a bigger group and maybe people split up a little bit into different conversations. But if you're doing the structured version of this, I would definitely recommend keeping it somewhere in that 6 to 12 range to have the ideal mix of enough voices to get different perspectives, but not so many that some people aren't comfortable talking. These pairings are definitely best when they are very interactive. So you want to be able to encourage people to speak freely and not be intimidated by the size of the group at all. If you're doing a more structured pairing, I would recommend planning about an hour for the formal part of the pairing. Obviously, you can have people hang out before and after that, but plan on about an hour. If this is going to be the more casual option, then you have a lot of freedom here. You can either do a much shorter casual pairing and then have something else planned for the evening, so maybe just half an hour, 45 minutes, or maybe you're planning to do the pairing while the group is doing something else, playing games or whatever it is. So you've got a lot more flexibility there, but for an actual structured pairing, just about an hour. You're going to be doing probably 3 to 5 courses. That's what I would recommend for the structured version of this. I generally plan about 15 minutes per course when I'm leading an event. Now, when I'm up formally leading a group through an event, there's a little bit of information that I need to front load into that presentation. So that's not an even 15 minutes for every single course, but 10 to 15 minutes is probably a good estimate for how long the group is going to need. So 4 courses is going to come in right about an hour. Again, if you're doing the more casual version of this, this can be a little bit more flexible. But I wouldn't plan more than about 5 or 6 courses max because people's palates can start getting fatigued. You aren't tasting things as sharply after that many rounds. And particularly, bitterness can build up after that many courses. Of all of our basic senses or basic tastes, bitterness is the one that takes the longest for our taste buds to register and the one that lingers on our taste buds the longest. Particularly with pairing chocolate and beer, both of those are things that can have elements of bitterness to them or other sensory characteristics that can amplify our perception of bitterness, astringency being an example. So after you have too many rounds of this, that can start to build up a little bit and you're starting to taste more bitterness in a pairing than might be there organically. So I generally try to cut that off at about 5 courses. Again, in the more casual version of this, you've got a little bit more flexibility there because you're not specifically walking people through individual pairings. You're letting them kind of pick what they want to try. So I would say 3 or 4 chocolates and beers, and then they can kind of free form combine those.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Final Gravity Issue 5 is now available in the shop on beantobarstool.com. This 5th issue of our zine telling personal, human-centered stories from the world of beer is full of great articles. Bono Segudu tells the story of the South African beer style Umkombothi, poignantly explaining its role in her culture and the importance in her family's celebrations and milestones. Maria Krugliak writes about discovering the Portuguese half pint after moving to Portugal during the COVID-19 pandemic. Amanda Bruns and Obakeng Malope discuss the water spirit Mamuhaswa and the collaboration beer they brewed in her honor. These and numerous other stories fill the 56 pages of this zine. We've expanded it and added a few features for this issue. It's full color, full of lots of beautiful photography and art. definitely check this out. It's on beantobarstool.com/shop. You can purchase this issue or subscribe, and you can always support us on Patreon and get extra perks as well. Cheers. As they're going through. Whatever kind of pairing you're planning, it's going to be important to let your guests know what to expect in advance for a few different reasons. For one thing, it's just best for people to know what they're getting into before they come to an event, particularly folks who deal with anxiety, which is a larger part of the population than folks without anxiety might realize. But things that don't seem like they would be anxiety producers at all can kind of build up in someone's mind if they don't know what to expect. So tell them what's going to happen in the evening, where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing. Additionally, though, beer and chocolate pairing isn't really something that has a ton of visibility or familiarity in culture at large. People are much more familiar with the idea of a wine pairing. And even though beer is an incredibly versatile pairing beverage, it still doesn't carry that cachet of just being an expected pairing, something that you're going to center an entire tasting or pairing event around. So it can help to give people a little bit of understanding of what this is going to include. Let them know how long the event's going to take, where you're going to have it, what it's going to involve. Is this going to be something where you're all just kind of sitting around and talking about this? Or is there going to be somebody who you've hired to come in and lead the event? Or are you going to be guiding people through this? Additionally, if somebody doesn't have a lot of familiarity with beer, they might either be intimidated by the idea of a tasting event where they're going to be maybe expected to share tasting notes on something that they don't know anything about, or they might assume that because beer is maybe not their preferred beverage, that this isn't going to be something that they're going to enjoy. So let them know this isn't something where they're going to have to drink a bunch of beer they hate or something that is just purely a celebration of beer, but this is a sensory experience, a way for the group to maybe experience something new together. And finally, while it seems funny to say, encourage your guests not to wear any cologne or perfume or aftershave or anything like that that is too strongly scented, because that is going to interfere with everybody's ability to smell and taste their beer and chocolate, particularly in the small environment of a living room or something like that. So just a kind of quick heads up to give people. Now, the next thing you've got to figure out is which beers and which chocolates you're going to serve and how you're going to get them. And this is once again going to be dependent upon whether you're doing the more casual version of this or the more structured event. If you're doing the more casual event, this is a little bit simpler. You can go to a bottle shop or a local brewery and let them know that you're wanting to get 4 or 5 different beers for a tasting. You want those beers to be very different from each other. Maybe you're not overly concerned about what the specific styles are, and kind of let them pick 4 or 5 beers for you. Now, specifically, I would suggest you let them know this is a tasting and not a pairing. The reason being is that the hopefully very helpful and well-intentioned employees of that bottle shop or brewery might hear the specific pairing you're wanting to do, chocolate, and try to kind of plan that for you, and that might not necessarily give you the results you're looking for. So just let them know you want to try some beers that are very unique from each other, and they can recommend some stuff to you. Of course, if you know a little bit about beer yourself, by all means, just pick out a variety of different beers. On the chocolate side, if you already know something about chocolate, then just pick out a variety of chocolates that you already know you enjoy. If you are coming to this as a beer fan who doesn't know a whole lot about chocolate, I would recommend going to a website like barandcocoa.com and looking through what they've got. Pick out 3, 4, 5 different bars that look different from each other and sound interesting to you. Now, if you're wanting to do a more structured pairing, then you're going to need to plan these courses a little bit more. I'm not going to get into specific course recommendations here, but if you go to beantobarstool.com, we've got a bunch of episodes where we talk about pairing. There's a number of blog posts, especially recently, that have specific recommendations. Of course, you can check out the Pairing Beer and Chocolate book. Those are going to be where you're going to find a lot of recommendations for specific examples to check out. Of note, there is a blog post on beantobarstool.com called The 5 Most Versatile Beer Styles to Pair with Craft Chocolate. Those are going to be great styles to start with. They are going to kind of give you a leg up and a better chance of success with your individual pairings. One more option, if you are doing the more casual method, is offload this responsibility onto your guests. Have each of them bring either a beer or a chocolate or both. That way, you're not responsible for handling this all yourself. I find in general that this tends to be a little bit more successful with having your guests bring the beers because craft chocolate still doesn't have a ton of visibility. So unless you know that your guests know something about the craft chocolate world, they're probably either going to have a lot of trouble finding the type of chocolate that you're looking for or bring something that maybe you would not consider craft chocolate and is going to leave you a little bit disappointed. So have your guests maybe bring the beer, have each of them bring a beer that they love. Don't even really need to set any guidelines around that. And then you can provide an assortment of chocolates. Make sure that they know that the beers do not need to be rare or incredibly expensive or the most impressive thing they can find. You can do an event like this with easy to find 6-pack beers just as long as you have a good variety. Now, there's a few things that you're going to need to do in preparation for the event. If you are going to be responsible for providing the beer and chocolate, you're going to want to make sure you have a little bit of information to share with your guests about those. Even if you're just doing this in a really casual, laid-back way, you're still going to want to be able to tell your guests, what style the beers are, which may not be on the can or bottle label. If it is not, type in the brewery and beer name into Google, and if the information is not on their website, you can go to the result for either Untapped or Beer Advocate, and it should give you the style of the beer. Make sure you can tell the guests the ABV of the beer so they know how strong it's going to be. And for either the beer or the chocolate, although this is more important on the chocolate side, you're going to want to make sure that you give your guests any food allergy information. And this is so important that I would actually go so far as to say you inquire of all your guests in advance if they have any food allergies. If they do, and it is something relatively minor, then you can probably work around that a little bit. Maybe they just can't try a particular chocolate or whatever. But if they have a serious food allergy, something that is going to be medically significant, if they come into contact with that allergen, then you need to make sure, obviously, that you've eliminated that from your pairing and from the space. So making sure in advance, find out from your guests proactively if they have any allergies like that, and make sure not only that those allergens are not obvious inclusions in the chocolate, but look at the chocolate packaging and make sure that the chocolate hasn't come in contact with one of those allergens. If you are going the more structured route, I like to have a little bit more information here. Look up a little bit of the backstory of the brewery or the chocolate maker, if there's anything interesting in their story that would be noteworthy. If there are simple tasting notes provided on the brewery or chocolate maker's website, you can have those on hand to kind of stimulate discussion if maybe people are a little slow to speak up. It can also be good to have tasting sheets or just paper and pens for folks to take notes if you think your group would enjoy doing that. As far as tasting glassware and dishes, for the glassware for the beer, you're going to want something smaller than a standard beer glass. Ideally, this does not need to be anything terribly specific. A wine glass, a snifter, any kind of tulip glass is going to work. You can even get those clear, hard plastic, disposable, like cocktail glasses at the store. You don't need to overthink this too much or stress out about it. When I lead events, I use 9-ounce snifters, glass snifters, but whatever you've got on hand is probably going to be fine. As far as plating the chocolate, this is going to depend a little bit upon the familiarity of the group and your comfort with each other. You can use one platter or plate and, have everybody take pieces off of that. You can all just take turns snapping pieces off of the individual bars. However, if not everybody in the group is comfortable with that, I would recommend you have small plates, either paper plates or normal glass plates, whatever, or even printed tasting mats. Either one works fine. And then maybe just a pair of tongs to be able to serve individual pieces onto those for each person. Don't break up the chocolate, though, until everybody has had a chance to see the mold of the bar, because that's a really fun visual thing, especially for folks who maybe are new to craft chocolate and aren't aware of the variety that's out there. That can be a really fun way to get people invested in what they're about to taste. You can chill the beer for about an hour before the event. You don't have to leave this in your fridge for forever. You can store it in your kitchen and put it into your fridge just about an hour or so, and then take it out maybe 10 or 15 minutes before the event starts. You don't want your beer to be ice cold, just chilled down a little bit. So then let's talk about what the event itself is going to be like. One thing that I really strongly recommend is having a welcome beer or a welcome drink of some kind for folks when they first get to the event, especially if this is going to be an event that is maybe new to a lot of people in your group. Having a drink before you get started will loosen people up a little bit, help them to be a little bit more comfortable. This should not be anything terribly strong or anything really aggressively flavored, and it does not need to even be a full pour. Maybe 6 to 8 ounces in a glass of something like Pilsner, wit beer, Hefeweizen, something 5.5% or under. You can even do a toast with this as you're getting started if you want to get fancy with it, but just having a welcome beer is a lot of fun, a nice touch. And then you're going to want to have some extra beer and extra chocolate for people to sip on and nibble on after the main part of the event is over while they're just hanging out. Now, if you're doing the more casual free-form version of a pairing, maybe this is a little bit less important because they're just kind of hanging out and doing this anyway. But if you're doing a more planned, structured pairing, I would definitely recommend you have this so people can just kind of relax a little bit at the end, have more of their favorite beers and chocolates. These can even be different beers if you want, but just have some more things for folks to enjoy afterward. Depending on how much beer you're planning on letting people enjoy after the event, it can be good to let them know about the plans before the event so they can make any necessary transportation arrangements if they need to. Additionally, with these extra beers, this can be a great place to involve your guests. If you did not have them bring the beer, have a couple people bring, some 6-packs for afterwards. Take that off your plate. Now, when it comes to the actual process of pairing itself, whether or not you're doing a structured or casual event, it can still be good to give people a little bit of heads up of what they're actually doing and how they'll get the most out of this before you get started. Most important thing is that everybody understands that this is supposed to be fun. There's no pressure on this experience. There's no pressure for anybody to live up to a particular expectation. You're going to have some folks in the group who do not feel terribly confident. Inevitably, in a setting like this, you'll have folks who say, I don't have a good palate, or I'm not a good taster. Maybe they don't know much or anything about beer or chocolate. None of that matters. One of the great things about tasting beer or chocolate or anything else with a group is that we all have unique palates. We all have unique backgrounds that inform the sensory vocabulary we use for describing smells and tastes. There are no right or wrong answers. Make sure everybody feels relaxed and able to share what they're tasting and experiencing, and not just able to, but that they're invited to, and that you are eager to hear what they have to share. The other side of that is make sure that the group understands those rules, that they're not to make anybody else in the group feel silly for what they say or like they've said something wrong. Hopefully your friend group doesn't have that jerk who wants to know the most and make everybody else feel like they know less or like they aren't as good of a taster. But whoever you've got in your group, just make sure that you kind of set that expectation and those ground rules from the very beginning. Even if you're just doing an informal pairing, I would still recommend that you remind people to engage all of their senses in this process. Most of the specialized tasting processes that get used for wine and coffee and beer and chocolate and whatever else, 95% of it just comes down to slowing down and paying attention. Now, when you're pairing beer and chocolate, there is one main physical consideration that you need to let your guests know about, and that is to make sure that they taste the chocolate first. Good chocolate is going to melt just a little bit below body temperature. And so if you put it in your mouth and immediately take a sip of cold beer, the chocolate is not going to melt and you're not going to get a whole lot out of that. So let them know, taste the chocolate first. Once it has melted, then go ahead and taste the beer. And then once everybody's had a chance to do that, share your thoughts with the group, take some notes, however you're arranging that. Plan on giving everybody just a small square of each chocolate and 2 to 4 ounces of each beer to start out if you're going to be actually serving these as individual courses. Again, there will be some left over so they can have more when the event is done, but you want to do small samples here so that their palates are not getting fatigued. You'll find some advice online and in books from some highly qualified tasters who will recommend the most low stimulation environment possible for ideal tasting. So a clean, well-lit room, very, very little visual stimuli, no music, sitting upright because they want as little distraction as possible. And if you are on a professional sensory panel for a brewery or a chocolate maker, or you're a professional who's doing a review or judging or something like that, then absolutely you want as little distraction as possible. But that's not really what we're looking for when we're doing this in a social environment. We want our guests to be comfortable. We want everybody to be as relaxed as possible. Comfortable seating, low but adequate lighting, and some pleasant background music are all going to help people feel a little bit more relaxed. That might seem obvious, but again, there are some experts who will recommend you do this in as an aesthetic environment as possible, and I don't really recommend that. Finally, if you really want to make this a memorable and special event, hire a guide. There are a lot of professionals out there in the chocolate and beer spaces who lead private in-home events. I am one of them. I am available to do these type of events. So by all means, reach out to an expert and have us plan your event for you. If you hire me to do this, I will walk you through everything you need for the event. I will select the beers and chocolates, and I will lead the entire event beginning to end. I can do that in person if you're in the area. I'm here in Western Ohio, but more likely virtually. And I can connect over Zoom, and we can do this remotely, and I will lead your whole group through a really fun pairing. So by all means, get in touch through the Bean to Barstool website or DM me on social media and we can talk about that. But if you have another chocolate or beer professional that you know that you want to work with, great, reach out to them. We can plan really fun and memorable events for you and your friends. Beer and chocolate are supposed to be fun. Pairings are supposed to be fun. So plan a fun event for you and your friends. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Make sure there's no pressure on them. Just get together and enjoy beer and chocolate. There is so much variety and versatility between these two. Pick up my Pairing Beer and Chocolate book if you want some step-by-step guidance, both on recommendations for specific pairings and also much of the information that we covered today on how to plan an event. Reach out to me if you're interested in hiring me to lead a pairing for your group. And once again, if you are a chocolate maker or brewery owner or work for one of those and you're interested in stocking the Pairing Beer and Chocolate book or in hiring me to lead a pairing for your institution, by all means get in touch and we can talk about the details for that. Hope you all are drinking some great beer and enjoying some great chocolate out there. Let me know what you've paired recently and enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Cheers.